Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
Broadcasting from our Sanctum Sanctorum in Venice, California. I'm Krista.
I'm Olivier.
And we are the Sixth Sense Society. Is free will possible, or are we fated to live a predetermined life? Tonight we discuss what philosopher David Hume calls the most contentious question for metaphysics, the question of the nature of free will. But before we get going, let's see if Michael has any announcements.
Hi, gang. I think it's going to be a really great show tonight. I'm really looking forward to this one. And I've been debating fate versus free will with myself for a long time, whether which one is dominant. Does one exist? Does the other exist? So I'm looking forward to hear what you guys have to say tonight. Only a couple of announcements and nothing really super important in terms of the show itself. But although we are possibly considering perhaps moving to a different time slot, but we'll let you guys know out there if we're going to do that well ahead of time. The main thing is the upcoming show next week, which is Spirits and Sirens, which is another all-girl ghost hunting team from Michigan. They'll be joining us by video. And so we're pretty excited about that, and we're really looking forward to it. And Krista and I seem to be dragged further and further into the ghost hunting world these days, thanks to our friends David Oman and the show and all these really cool people that we've been hanging out with. So it's been a lot of fun. And I have to say, and I think Krista will agree, that ghost hunters seem to be some of the nicest people around. They just are a lot of fun to hang out with. So we're pretty excited about that. Other than that, I think that's the show coming up, and we should be excited with it. And, this show is being pre-recorded, but we're going to be on live chat with the premiere. So Chris and I will be there, and if you guys have questions or you want to interact, just go ahead and chat with us, and we'd love to hear from you. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys, and I'm sure I will have lots to jump in with.
Yes, I'm sure you will.
Hopefully.
So how do you define even free will? What do you think it is?
Well, it's a long story that's been going on for a long time, but I put it in three parts, actually: destiny, free will, and fate. And I noticed something when I was doing my research yesterday about destiny, which is one of the first things I'm going to talk about, is it's determined by who you are. So that's your destiny. And I was noticing there's a parallel between astrology and destiny. If you look at those two, when you look at astrology, there's your chart, it's made of what you are. And if your destiny is like astrology, you have to use what's given to you. And once you find it, you live your life through this. So that's one part of the three different parts I was talking about. So I don't know what you think about this. But...
Well, I know this is really, really basic, but I like to start off with looking at things very simply. So in the Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy, one definition for free will was basically the capacity unique to persons that allows them to control their actions. Evidently, in philosophy, not necessarily spirituality, there's even a huge debate on exactly how to define free will. There's two simple words: free will.
Exactly.
And then even will, as you probably know, I've seen in spiritual books the idea of the little will with and then the big will with the capital W, which Aleister Crowley talks about in his books, and unifying with your higher will, which is often connected to the cosmic plan.
Yeah.
So it gets really quite complicated on what exactly is free will. Does it mean I just do what I want when I want it? Is that, of course, that's not even possible. That can't possibly be true, because I could say, well, I'm going to jump off this roof because I will fly. And we know that's not what it really means, but it's so broad and so
Yeah,
such
and,
a basic, two basic words.
exactly. And if you separate them, free. So what freedom do you have in your life? How much freedom do you have, and how much can you will what you want in your life, or you can get what you want, basically. And who's deciding? Who's deciding for what you want? So if you have a destiny, if you have a fate. So the other thing I wanted to say about fate. So I was starting to say to tell you about the three parts. And fate is a path determined by our circumstances. So basically, is what I understand with that is like fate is a kind of a reactive mode. You're in a reactive mode by what you live in your past and your patterns. So you're gonna reproduce those patterns throughout your life. If you don't know who you are, which is your destiny, then when you find out who you are and you discover what are your talents, and maybe you can start have a free will and act upon those. And but there's a point when you discover that you don't really have 100% control of this. We had a show about synchronicity, remember? And you were here.
I think I was.
Were you?
Willingly.
Yes, please. And I was talking about the orchestration of events, and I think with the free will, it separates it from having an understanding of someone orchestrating your life and directing you somewhere. So if you have free will, that means there's nobody orchestrating your life or bringing you events or things that you want, which is not true. I don't think it's true. You have there's always something that surprises you that you're going to encounter, and that's in your life. And that shows you have free will, yes. But it's like a partnership, I would say, in this free willing things.
I agree. And, at this point in my life, and this is exactly where I am right now, it might change. I have come to conclude that there are three forces basically we work with, and I call them free will, destiny, and chaos. Chaos may have something more to it structurally, but I like the word chaos because I think that if I was really going to learn as a soul, if I knew everything that was coming, even on a soul level, I wouldn't be surprised. And it also, if everything is predetermined, then none of us would go to readers. Why would you need to?
Yeah.
You would just say, whatever my life is my life. I can't change it at all.
So I stay in bed.
Yeah, and I base that on the Tree of Life. There are three main paths. With the left-hand path to me is the chaotic path, the middle path is destiny, and the right-hand path is the one of free will. And most of us have a mix of them going. We have a mix of periods where we seem to have more free will. Everything's kind of going the way we want it to go. Like, wow, it's just so easy. Then I've had periods myself where no matter what I did, pray, work, I was still running through certain themes. And all I could do was accept the consequences of themes that I didn't even know how I'd created them. So I think that to me, that's my experience so far, and also what I've thought about over time that makes sense for me at this point in my life.
Yeah, and I was watching yesterday like a video about free will, and there's one that there was a scientist, and he was talking about what is the free will with like science and in general. When you plant a seed of a tree, if it's an apple seed, it's going to be an apple tree. You're going to have apples. So there's no free will about this. It's destiny. It's preordered. And nothing to do with fate, I think. But so the free will that you're going to have if you plant that seed is to nurture that seed and to make it grow into a strong tree and get the best of the tree you can have. So that's the free will you can have. You can also disregard this seed and let it grow by itself and see what happens. So that's kind of the fate or the by chance. So I think we can differentiate all those things and separate them.
I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I did also want to sort of share a couple of really cool ideas from a couple of the luminaries that I like. I really like Edgar Cayce, so I found several quotes of his, and it was from this great website, by the way, called awakeningofthegods.com. They actually had a good article on free will and a bunch of really cool quotes. And what Edgar Cayce said was free will and predestination coexist within human beings. He said their past experiences limit them in probability and incline them in certain directions, but free will can always draw the sword from the stone, which I love that idea.
beautiful, yeah.
I said, wow, that's something to really think about, like a cone. What does he mean by that? Draw the sword from the stone. That means we're probably capable of a lot more miracles than we can imagine, which I personally feel we don't know how to use our free will. And the people that learn to, they seem more magical because they're able to pull on, but they still have basically a path they're on that they're kind of meant to be on.
Yeah, which is the destiny part of it.
Right,
Which
the
is
destiny.
the astrological part of it. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That once you know what you can. And I wanted to say something about the destiny and the astrological and your chart and everything. And I had this example of a child at school, and is really like slow and a slow learner. So when you're at school, you have to learn everything, mathematics and grammar and everything. And what if he's bad in grammar? What are they going to do? They're going to tell this child to learn more and to work harder to know about grammar or mathematics. But at the end, what good does it do to him? Because once they know what his talents or his skills are, he doesn't need to learn those things. So there's a reason why I think we should have like people find out who they are so they can blossom into the best of themselves, and not have to struggle throughout life and be reactive to their fate, because that's a fate. Once you push somebody in a certain direction, they're going to struggle and they can't be happy. I don't know how to describe it. I don't know if you follow what I'm saying.
Yeah, I do actually. And there's a lot of layers to that thought, in that one reason, for instance, children are not allowed to express their real interests will be because, say, the parents were not allowed.
Yeah.
Another reason could be that they live in a very strong religious environment that expects them to behave a certain way, and they're really forced to behave, rather than like a friend of mine who actually is quite spiritual, decided just to basically show her son different religions, and if he wanted to pick one, she would be open to it, but just to say, here's what's out there for you. And I thought, what a great idea, like a buffet of
exactly.
And even if he didn't want any of it, it was okay. But she said she didn't want to make him into something like
a mold like everybody wants you to be. And that's what I'm saying that it should not be that way. The free will is part of letting you be yourself. So you can have what you want in your life and be who you are, as long as it doesn't bother anyone, And you remember when before we started the show, I said maybe my free will is to stand up and leave the show right now. I have the choice. It's a choice I can make. But what are the circumstances? The consequences.
Yes,
that's the one.
There are consequences to our
I
actions.
sat down because I choose to. That's my free will to live or not. But it's ridiculous. But the choices that you are making are there to make you happy and get what you want in life. And I don't know where I'm going with this, anyways. But
another thing about the idea of it being, it seems from a couple of the spiritual teachers I was reading that a combination is possible of free will and predestination. But also what I was getting from Yogananda and Casey was that the more conscious you become as an individual, you seem to have more free will, which is ironic because usually the more conscious a person becomes, they want to be part of what is called some kind of cosmic plan. But the idea that makes a little sense to me, that I'm not going to be as reactive. If I work on my own inner world and I learn to work on my wounds and my belief systems and not to react to things, I have more choice than already to respond. And I thought, well, that's an interesting idea, that there's these levels of possibility depending on where your consciousness is. And there was something Edgar Casey said that was kind of actually odd. It was about how some souls basically had made so many mistakes in past lives that they were not allowed as much free will when they first came back. That's it sounds like a punishment, but I guess he's basically saying they kind of did it to themselves. And I thought, well, how do you know if you're one of those souls? I mean, I guess a past life regression would help.
Yeah, maybe.
And many of them say that karma doesn't happen all in the same life. And Crowley said that that you can experience maybe a bunch of difficult karma at once if you really want to wipe it out, but sometimes it's more gradual, like it's a mix. And I thought that was kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
So it'd be hard to tell, like, okay, why am I still stuck in this little town and I can't move no matter what I do? Because maybe it was a past life thing. You know, I was a king and I abused
Well, so
abused everybody.
I have a lot of karma to work on. Yeah, and it's something that's very interesting too. Free will is, I think, is about like thinking and creating your life and deciding for what you want. But when you listen to all the spiritual teachers and scientists as well, I think, when you meditate, you're supposed to empty your mind and be joyful and not think about anything. And even relaxation and meditation tells you that that's how you create your life, but not thinking about things. So it's kind of a paradox, I would say, if you want to free will your life and not having, and the way to create it is not thinking. There's like something that's contradictory, I think. And
well, that's a misnomer, at least for Tibetan Buddhist
Yeah.
meditation, is that it's not about erasing all thoughts, because that's not possible.
Yeah, you
What we're
can't quiet
taught
your
was
mind. Yeah, it's true.
you're not supposed to fixate and attach yourself, even if it's a beautiful fantasy. You're supposed to kind of see it as one technique is, even every time you think, you say the word thinking, no matter what it is, and then they just start kind of flowing through, and basically you are dealing with what they call the monkey mind.
Yeah.
And there's a deeper natural awareness that will arise on its own, and that's where inspiration comes. That's what we're trying to do as meditators, is really tap into the real essence of the mind. So, because I was luckily trained immediately in very good meditation practices. So we were never told that our thoughts would go away. We were never, it wasn't about clearing your mind.
You can't. It's
you
can try for
impossible.
30 minutes and you think about something. It's impossible. Yeah.
You
And-
can't slow them down, though, because when I first, look, I was in my 20s, I
It's
first started
relaxation.
meditating. My thoughts were so speedy. I remember even Casey talked about how mind is the builder, and I was like, I'm in trouble. I can't even see all my thoughts. They're like racing around, going all over the place. I don't even know what I'm building, you know? And I thought, this is impossible. I remember thinking, I'll never be able to do that. And I can do that. I can slow my mind enough to see at least the main sort of conscious thoughts, and, you know, see what, my mind's really fixated on that problem at work. I've been thinking about it for 20 minutes now. Isn't that enough? you know?
Yeah.
So then you can say, you can let it go and say, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to think about something else. And that's a very basic view, I think, that's important, that people can reach very quickly with meditation.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk about trauma and things like this, like and focusing as well. And somebody who has had a lot of trauma in their lives, or is an alcoholic or something like this, and do they have a free will of getting better? Do they want to get better? Can they get better? Do they have a choice? Because it's so ingrained in their body and their psyche and their emotions that how much free will do they have to change? Or do they want to change? Or do they want to keep this trauma and those emotions like stuck into themselves and live throughout their life with this burden? So what's holding them back, and what's not allowing them to change? And do they have a free will with this?
Well, going back to the idea that sometimes astrology can give us insight or pointers, there are charts where some Western astrologers anyway believe that if you have planets, I don't know if it's to the right or the left side of the chart, if you have a lot predominantly, you're here in a life that is a ripening life. And there's another where you have more predetermination. So that, then also if you follow astrology, and again, I'm talking Western because the Vedic is quite different, even though they can be quite fatalistic and all that too. You would probably look at things like Pluto and Saturn and see if it's particularly difficult. And by bringing consciousness to the situation, it does already shift it. So we all know that once I sit down, and even if I say, I'm going to look at my life now, that's a step in the right direction.
Exactly.
And even if it takes 30 years to
seed.
shift,
Yeah.
it's a seed.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a question I ask myself sometimes too as a reader. I see a lot of people over time, and once in a while there's someone so stuck, I'm stuck about how to help them.
Yeah.
And there's no real explanation from my point of view, from the card's point of view, and knowing the person. I don't have like a tarot explanation. And I've thought about that's the million or billion or $1 trillion question. What is the catalyst that helps people to truly change? That says, I've had enough. And even if the change takes 10 years, they're working at it.
Or the trigger.
They're not just falling back to
Yeah.
the same thing
Yeah.
over and over again. That's a great question. I don't have an answer for it really. Just a few maybe pointers that might help, but even then they may not help because there can be people that have. We all know there are people that have tremendously difficult lives that do amazing things with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Or
Yeah.
they use it, or they heal themselves, or they just, they suffer all their life. And I wanted to talk about focusing and things. And I got this idea with the free will and the choice and free choice, which is, I don't know if it's the same or it's a little bit twist to it. And that in the tarot deck, there's a card that's the Two of Swords. I don't know if I told you one time when I had a reading with you. And basically, this person has something covered. The eyes are covered, and doesn't matter really. She has two swords, and the two swords are the same, and she's supposed to choose for a path, which way to go. And I always thought about this, and I looked at the card, and for me, I think that since it's two different roads you have to choose or pick up for your life. When you look at the card, the swords are the same swords. So I think either way you go, you're going to have the same experience. Maybe it's going to be a different color, different people, but you're going to have to go through the same experience because it's the same sword. You pick this one, you go this way. You pick this one, you go this way. So it's the same sword. You have the same experience. And that's what I'm talking about destiny. I think there's something that's really preordained, and you can't.
Well, I think there's a
skip
difference
it.
between preordained and destiny, though. I think destiny is those deeper themes that we all have in our lives that are repetitive because we, on some level, have chosen. I have chosen, for instance, in this life, which is very true, to learn about relationship, and it's prominent in my astrology chart. It was my driving force until yearly mid-30s is love. That was the thing, even though I could have done other things. And I knew even from a little girl, I used to think a lot about love. And so it was one of the things I was meant to theme-wise experience. Now, within a theme, I think it can be like a spiral where I'm going through the theme, but if I'm consciously working with it and growing, when I get to the similar point, I can see it from a different angle. And also, there can be various expressions of the theme. It doesn't have just like, you are going to marry so-and-so and have, this experience with this one person and they're going to die or something. It's not like that.
No,
it's more of like a pattern that and then within the pattern, as you actually become more aware of the play in it, you experience it maybe a little differently or you have a different viewpoint.
It's what's your relation to the other. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And but exactly, if you have to learn about relationship, what your free will is to leave it to choose where you. That's what I was saying with the two swords. You can do it in Los Angeles. You can go. You have the free will to do it somewhere else, but you're gonna have the same experience. And learning about relationship. That's what I'm trying to explain. We don't really have a choice. We just have to learn what we have to learn. And I don't like the idea that we're on this planet to learn things or have lessons. I really don't like it, but I don't have no explanation for now about it.
You know who also doesn't like it? Dr. Stephen Holler. I was at the Gnostic lecture, and he said he didn't like that
I don't
idea
like
that
that
we're
idea.
here as it's a school to grow. And he's very well known.
But it's true in a way,
teacher.
but it's I think it's more like experiencing something and learning through the experience. But I don't think that's the first thing you do here, but learning things. I think it's basically being the best you can and shine and show it to the world. I think we are Leo.
I don't even think it's
smart.
that even. Personally, I'm maybe a little more open to the fact that some people are here to have some experiences that I might not consider good. And I don't mean necessarily criminal, but there can be things that if that's true, we're here to have a variety of experiences. It does open the idea that there are maybe some difficult experiences that a human being might not choose to go through, but a soul would. And again, there's some things I think are just completely wrong. So
No,
no matter what.
you're right, and it's about the point of view actually. How you view the experience the other has, and that's so negative for everybody. You see it if you really detach from it, and you see like in a spiritual way or religious way. You can see it as just an experience. From everybody, it's like bloody, it's horrible. So what is happening? But it's like when the universe is created, then you can. There's a storm. You can think that the storm is horrible or you're gonna die. It's horrible. But it's beautiful. It's energy and it's all an experience. But it's just about the way you view it, I would say.
I also would like to go back to what you were talking about, the word will versus choice, and I think the word will is different, only based on what when I was reading how people use the word will. And for instance, Yogananda had an interesting thought about willpower. He says it's that which changes thought into energy. And as you know, even if you look at the will connected to the solar plexus, when a person's will is broken, which a lot of society likes to do, it's very difficult, even when the doors are open, for people to walk through. So the concept, both on sort of a physiological, psychological level of willpower, is essential for consciousness. And it's something I've thought about for a long time, having struggled as a young woman with being dominated by really strong people, to the point I used to get sick in my stomach even. And then having to get even that primitive will back, let alone what they're talking about, sort of the higher will. So I think will is a powerful word and a powerful idea. And I think, again, I think it'd be hard to pinpoint it. Choice, to me, maybe falls in a subcategory of will. That will is the main thing, and then within that I have some choices that I can pick. This is my will, but it can be that or that, like the Two of Swords, going back to that. So I like to use that word too, because it has that sort of martial arts kind of energy. And then, of course, that's your seat, your core, where you have to be rooted in both, as a spiritual being and as like a physical being. You have to have a strong core. So to me, the will is important in the word willpower.
Yeah, and maybe, exactly. I think free will is more a thought process. And it's like, okay, tonight I'm going to have some chicken. So that would be my free will. That's what I decided to do. So after I go to the supermarket and I have the free choice of choosing between this chicken and this chicken, how I want my chicken, maybe that's just simple like this.
Well, when it gets a little complicated, I guess, is when, first of all, in order to have freedom at all, or the concept of freedom, we have to have spent time enough to know what is really ours and what we have been told we like.
The limitations.
And the limitations. So we have to spend time getting to know ourselves in a very honest and objective way, which again is a Buddhist practice where when you first start sitting in meditation, the idea is you accept whatever is there, even if you're, a really awful person you feel, or you've done, things you're ashamed of. You have to make friends with that. You have to say, you know what, that's me. Because without accepting that, there's no way you'll actually change.
And accept the consequences.
Exactly. So, so everything, it does seem like the concept of free will is very much tied up with the idea of evolving as into a conscious human being or a spiritual being, if you want to call it that too. So, and that's definitely emphasized in the spiritual teachings.
Yeah, and there's something about free will that's singular. It's like it's just you, and there's nothing around. You just go and you move it through life like a bulldozer, and you push everything around, and that's what I want. I have my free will. I have my freedom. I decide for what I want. But there's a partnership in this. That's what I'm talking about, like destiny and things. There's always something that's going to show you that you can decide as much as you want, but you're going to still have some reactive energy around you, and that are going to be confronted to.
And also, Yogananda's had something nice to say too about kind of the mix of both. He said that life is governed by a cosmic plan, but we have freedom to change our part in the drama, which I liked. And then he gave a very touching interpretation of the story of Jesus and Judas. Basically, Yogananda was a realized being, so then we have to assume that he knows what he sees through his, his clairvoyance or his sight or whatever his spiritual intuition is. And he saw that Judas had been accepted already by Jesus in a former life as one of his spiritual sons. But in that life, at the end of that life, Judas had become quite greedy and his mind had become darkened. So when he came into his good fortune to be around Jesus again, he still had that tendency, that struggle, inward struggle. So according to Yogananda's illumination and seeing, he said that Jesus was being compassionate to Judas when he kept saying that you were going to betray me. He was trying to get him to look at his inner world in torment so that he could make a different choice. Now that's fascinating because you think, what if Judas had made a different choice? Would it have changed the story? Like, what would the story be? Would he still have been crucified? Or I was really, and I remember thinking that actually sort of makes some sense to me, you know, that could have happened, that we all have these crossroad moments of, I can just give in to my patterns wherever they come from, or I can basically, you know, be a warrior, inner warrior, and say, no, I'm not going to go down that darker path. So I'm always wrestling with my patterns.
And that's what I was saying about trauma. It's kind of the similar thing. You know, can you get out of it? Can't you? And I think that's part of the fate process. And what you're saying, like, if he was like this in the previous life, and he brings it to the next life, it's like a trauma, an alcoholic. Like, can he get out of it? But is he conscious about it? Is he aware that he can get out of it and that he has this, and that it's a sickness or it's a past life problem he had? And if he can choose to do have a different path in his life and not reenact what he did in the past. And that's a choice you make. And until somebody tells you that what you have, I don't know if you're aware 100% of what you have. And that's the part I was talking about, the child at school. You know, they're struggling to learn something when they don't need to learn this because they have other skills that nobody's telling them about. But maybe one day they're going to find somebody who's going to tell you, but you know, you're good at this, why don't you do it? And the other part is going to completely disappear, and he's going to be free and be himself.
Well, that's an interesting thought too, free to be yourself. And,
yes.
And that the idea of being your genuine self, your true self, what is that? And I know that's one of the things that people really strive to do, and to do it all the time. So one of the compliments of one of our longtime dear friends, he says we're always the same no matter what. We don't become something else when we're around certain people. And I would say that's very true of Michael and I. And I worked very hard to be myself. And then I got old enough, I just couldn't change. It's like, so being myself, luckily I got stuck with that concept, is like, I may as well be myself because, you know, that's who I am, and you like me or you don't.
Authentic.
And I know that is problematic in relationships when people are afraid to be themselves from the very beginning. Then the other person has sort of a view of who they are. So I think the concept of free will, especially the ability to respond and create life that's authentic, is very important in many pockets of our life to give us happiness. You know, and that seems to be philosophers. A little bit, I did look a little bit into the philosopher's view of free will, but I was overwhelmed by the technicality of it all since I'm not a philosopher. And it was quite complicated, but they seem very interested in the implication of free will, and things like morality and love and friendship are implied by this concept of whether or not we have free will. So, for instance, if I don't have free will, then whoever comes in my path, I'm just predestined to meet, so I may as well just accept it. What if they're all abusive?
Yeah, it's like somebody you don't want to talk to, and it calls you. You have the caller ID now, so you have the choice of not responding or picking up the phone. And but what good does it do to you not picking up the phone? You know, that's the consequences that we are talking about all the time. And I wanted to mention something about focusing, and people who are very focused on one thing and like achieving things, and willing themselves to achieve that goal. And I was thinking about this, and I think, are they missing out on everything else that's around? You know, if you focus on one thing, that's what you want. You're going to direct your attention to this, and you're going to work on this. But what about everything else? that's happening while you're doing this? Are you paying attention of everything that's presented to you, and you're missing out on experiences that are offered to you? Are you?
It's a good question. And is there a difference between like willing something from the ego's point of view and free will? Aleister Crowley, even in his books, he talks about this higher will and uses the capital W and he says, "Do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law.
Yeah.
Love under will."
Yeah.
Which I don't know why people don't say that next sentence. Love under will.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about his own writings to know what he meant by that, but it makes me think. It's one of those lines that goes, what does he mean by that? It's like, I'm going to think about love under will. And I do remember him saying that the only kind of black magic is when you interfere with someone else's will. And he didn't mean that, someone's murdering somebody. When let's say I don't approve Olivier is going out with, a Chinese woman, and I don't like Chinese people, and I just don't approve of it. So I block it somehow. Whether it's like directly or no, I just somehow it doesn't have to be black magic. People block people all the time without magic. Formal,
That's true. Yeah.
Think about families. How they block careers. They block relationships. And so I thought, well, that's an interesting idea about what is black magic. I'm blocking your will.
But what if the experience of the other one is to be blocked, and because they thought they can't achieve it, and they're not using their free will? Maybe that's what was brought to them, being blocked.
Well, then you're getting into that dubious and very superficial view of law of attraction, which I find a little repulsive at this point. The biggest argument I can say is, if you really believe in the law of attraction, that means you believe little babies deserve to die by serial killers. They attracted it to them. I mean, it's so uncompassionate on its own as a tenet, as a part of something bigger, such as the other Hermetic laws. I can understand it, or it's just so crass and so like wrong. Like, everything that comes to me, I have created. Okay, that means there's no free will.
And it's a lot of work.
And it is a lot of work. And it's a fairly narcissistic view if you think about it. Like, I am the center of the universe. And so even if it's bad, I created it. It's like, no, it's an interplay of creation, like you said earlier.
You are the center of your experience.
Yes, different.
Yeah.
Different, very different. So I get so annoyed by that, and then also this, some people think that certain Buddhist people think because you're supposed to be practicing non-attachment means you don't care. Non-attachment basically you're not like holding things so painfully. So if I, for instance, if I lose my best friend, I allow the whole process to go through me. I don't hold on to it or block it. I experience it and let it go, basically. And then I'm shaped by it. And it's more of an organic process. But I found when I was meditating more, I was more connected to my feelings of all kind. I felt more compassion. So there's this really wrong view about what happens. You become some detached, non-thinking creature floating through the air if you meditate. But I think that, again, I think it does seem to be a mix of some sort of destiny, maybe broad themes and free will. But at the same time, there are teachings and teachers that say that some people seem to be able to accelerate their learning. One of the famous examples in Tibetan Buddhism is the Yogi Milarepa, who became enlightened in one life and very quickly, and he started out as a black magician. But what he did to do that was so arduous that most of us would not be able to. And I have met in readings, I have read for a couple people. There was one man that Michael and I both met when we were doing readings in Halifax on the waterfront, and he was a man coming from Los Angeles who had actually worked for many years in the porn industry. And he was, however, going back to his spiritual roots, and he had some indigenous roots, and he had left all that and was studying and really embracing his authentic path in his mind. And so we used to exchange, I think, readings, or maybe I did the readings for him with the medicine cards. And each week I didn't charge him. His energy was so different in a week. I'd never seen anyone shift so much, because usually you see someone in a week, there's similar cards.
It takes a while.
And I asked him, said, "What are you doing?" He says, "I'm just taking the advice of the cards." And I never forgot, like, I don't know what he was doing. He really had already some of that ability as a shaman to really move energy. So there are people, and again, what we could say, well, that was his destiny.
Yeah, that's what I was
maybe
about to
not,
say.
though. Maybe we have these moments of acceleration because of chaos, even.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying by the astrological part of it and the destiny. You have this in you. That's your like your credit account. You know, you have this. Are you going to spend it? Are you going to use it? And he did. But the way he did it, he was a black magician, as you said before. So he experienced the other side of enlightenment, and that's how he has his revelation.
Oh, you're talking about Milarepa.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole book called The Songs of Milarepa. It's a wonderful story, and it's very inspiring. There's so much more to it. I don't know. I mean, if you can also see chaos as a neutral force, and maybe you could say chaos is fate. I used to think when I first started doing readings that there was this concept of the fates, the Greek fates. And now and then they'd just come along and throw a bone at someone to see how they would manage it. And just by chance. And I still kind of feel that can happen, that sort of accidental thing where something lands on someone's feet that is not predestined, it's not destiny, and it's not free will. And that's just my romantic view in a sense. And perhaps they look for, if you see the higher forces as being a little impersonal, they look for potential vehicles that may be ready and may not be ready. And they're just going to try it. They're going to say, let's
maybe.
go.
But that's part of the orchestration I'm talking about. You know, like you are, it's a partnership, and you are the center of your experiences, I just said, and everything else is going to be brought to you, and you're going to have to understand what's happening.
If I can just jump in for a second, guys,
Yes.
listening to your conversation. There are a couple of things that really strike me. I agree with Crystal a lot, and I think that people that I see, a lot of them struggle with nuance. And so they're looking for a very simplistic way of looking at life. Everything is fated, or everything is free will, or, and so they have a tough time, where I think it is such an interplay of all these energies. I think fate may play a role, free will may play a role. It's complicated, it's gray, and I think people really struggle with that, and I think that that's okay. But again, I think that life is very, very complex, and I think that all of these things have some room to play. Another thing I think that's important is to start to look at science a little bit, especially with quantum physics and how it looks at time and space. Because to me, again, this is touching on these things. We're seeing now on a quantum level that time may go in both directions, and the future may actually be influencing the past as much as the past may be creating the future. And that implies fate to a degree, if time can go in both ways. So I think some of the particle stuff and some of the things they're doing in quantum physics, I think that is going to touch on this. And I think that it's where science and philosophy are maybe meeting up a lot at this point, which I think is amazing. So for me, if you guys are out there, try and look up a little of that stuff and some of the particle stuff that's going on, because it's just absolutely fascinating. And then one other thing real quick, and maybe to throw another wrinkle in it, is fate. We talk about fate and free will, but there's also this idea of purpose. People, what is my purpose in life? And is that part of fate or not? And I've often thought, well, maybe life, or what is my meaning, And I think maybe it's not so much that life has meaning, it's about creating a meaningful life. So whatever you're doing in this moment is your fate. You're fated to be sitting here doing this show. The show is your meaning of life. You're supposed to be putting your best into it. And that's where the free will part of it. I'm going to embrace this energy. I'm going to really put my heart and soul into it. I'm going to sort of give it my best. And I think we should be doing that with everything we do, whether it's changing a tire on my car or doing this show or anything else. That is my meaning in life. And it's about being present and being conscious. And that's such a big part of all these things.
And I get asked this question a lot, like, what's the purpose of life when I work in a restaurant? And I always,
Really? At the restaurant?
I'm serious. They always, you have no idea. People, they tell me their secrets and things. I have a face for secrets, to be told, too. And they always ask me, so what's the purpose of life? And I always give this answer. And I've been thinking about it a lot, and that's what I came with. It's the purpose of life is the one you give to it.
I agree with both of you, but I still find myself sometimes thinking I'm off purpose. And and I even thought to myself about 5 years ago, I said the purpose of life is to live, to
Experience.
really live life.
yeah.
And like Michael said, to live every part of life, because I think people think the word purpose is only for big things.
No,
I
it's
am
not.
going to go, save
Yeah.
the children in Africa, which is a great idea, and good luck to
Yeah.
that. But that your purpose can
That's a
be
mission,
having
that's
this
different. Yeah,
conversation
yeah,
here
exactly, yeah.
and bringing,
Yeah,
like you said,
yeah.
meaning to it.
Yeah.
One of the things I have found to be true for myself, and I also have found this in Jane Roberts' book and Robert Greene's book on mastery, is purpose is driven by passion.
Definitely.
And if you follow your passions,
Mm-hmm.
he's absolutely right. I followed my passions with metaphysics and I became a reader, but
Mm-hmm.
I didn't plan on ever being a reader. It really just happened on its own. In fact, I don't even think a psychic told me I'd be a reader. They said I was deeply intuitive, and one person actually told me not to be a reader because I'd be bored, which they are right. If I hadn't found the Kabbalah and palmistry is more of
It's too
intellectual,
simplistic
I
otherwise.
would have been
Yeah,
bored.
yeah.
But I was driven by my passions, and I think that why is it that people are afraid to follow their passions, and that's that freedom
Because they need security, and freedom is not security because it tells you to decide for your life and what you want to do with it. So if you're free, you can't. They want security. That's why we have the majority of people on this planet they get married, they have children, they have a career or a job, and they become grandfather and grandmothers, and after they die. But there's no purpose in their life because they don't want to go for it. They look for security.
I think also, when we look at a lot of these things, some cultures seem to be so fatalistic to me. We look at like India, for example, the caste system. You're born into this caste. You're supposed to stay in that caste. You have absolutely no right to advance or to better yourself.
No freedom.
No freedom of to grow. And some cultures on Earth, I think, are very fatalistic in the way that they look at things. Other cultures, maybe America, much more free will. Anybody can grow up to be president. You can be whatever you want to be.
Yeah, look what's
and so
happening.
there is, well, yeah. But I think that it's really interesting to see all these different cultural takes on it. And so, it's really a tricky thing. And again, fate versus free will. And is it one or the other or both? And I think it can be both. But to me, I struggle with the idea, and I see it used so often, the idea of fate, to oppress someone or to hold them down. This was your fate, so you have to accept it. You can't make it different. And it becomes just a way of abusing people by using fate as a way of making them a victim permanently almost.
Yeah, and fate is
That's so true.
It's about repetition. You're repeating your past, you're repeating your social status, you're repeating everything. So there's no decided for having a different life, and you can't because you're going to be killed if you change or be jailed. And that's fate. So that's about your upbringing, where you live, the color of your skin. That's fate. You decide from this, and the free will is about doing something with who you are, what you have, as I said already, and that's the freedom of what you can achieve in your life, and it gets to have some freedom and doing what you want.
And also something I wanted to mention in accordance with free will is the concept of karma.
Yeah.
And that's a lot, people will blame their karma.
It's karma, fate.
And so one of the most shocking things I discovered reading a book by Traleg Chabgun, who wrote a book on karma. Now, he was also a religious scholar, and he studied interdisciplinary religions. And so I picked up this book. Shockingly, there is no such thing as karmic law. It's purely a Western invention. He says there's no such phrase in Tibetan, Sanskrit, Chinese, or Japanese. And this is from his book. The misunderstanding seems to derive, at least in part, from the idea of natural law advanced by early Greek philosophers and subsequently the Christians, especially Thomas Aquinas. And so that whole morality part is not Buddhist. And I can understand why, because in Buddhism, there's this whole concept of no self. And it's it's very difficult for the Western mind to grasp. And also morality is not really the same. They don't really have this moral code. They have ethics and character that, when I read that, I said, I never knew that. Everyone, it's a Buddhist concept. No, it's actually a Greek concept.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. So that, people will blame their karma. and say, well, I have this karma, and I'm going through this, and it's in my chart too. And I think that is one of those conditionings I do think we can overcome. If it is karma, all it is, according to Casey, is a past memory. However painful that past memory is, you can respond differently now. So even if I meet someone who killed me in my past life somewhere, I don't have to keep up the cycle. I can do something. I have a choice, freedom, to respond differently. Whatever that is, I can just walk away. We can heal, whatever it is. And I like that idea, because it's almost like just having, even in this life, a lot of people live many lives in one life. They've had so many different experiences. We have a friend like that, and has gone through so much that in a way they've had a lot of lives. And yet that's not necessarily going to hold that person to the next thing they're going to do. And so I know it's sometimes difficult, because we are creatures of habit, and not all habit is bad. I think that's where you have to see, sometimes it's a practical thing. I have to change a habit of thinking, a habit of acting.
Yeah.
Maybe I always act fearfully. Why not try something different? See if something else happens if I do that.
Not offending anybody.
Yeah.
And there's also the idea of karma, when we talk about that. There's this concept that karma can be resolved instantly, and I've seen that before. And I often think of karma like a 20-mile-an-hour wind blowing you in the face. So you feel this force in your life, and it's affecting you. But if you decide to run in the opposite direction, 30 miles an hour, suddenly you don't feel the wind anymore. So I often feel like karma is what affects your life when you're refusing to do anything yourself. You're refusing to create. You're refusing to use your free will. Then karma is the dominant factor. But once you start to create, once you start to take charge, once you start to use that free will to do something positive, then that karma is no longer a significant factor in your life at that point.
Yeah, and when you think there's only now, so if karma is like a baggage on your shoulders, you really can't do anything, because it weighs on you, and if you're supposed to be only in the present moment and now, so you're supposed to observe what's happening and go for what you want and achieve it. And if karma is so heavy on you, it's like it weighs you down. You don't move forward.
Well, that's if you have what's called bad karma. And Michael, you'll like this, because Trelig says that, Rinpoche says that eventually you want to have neutral karma. But until you do, you want to build up stores of good karma. So, because eventually you don't want to have either if you want to be free from samsara. And he also talks about the intricacies of different kinds of karmic strands, which is really fascinating, that we think of karma as maybe just one sort of thing coming at us. And he says actually there are many different kinds of karma and different sort of interactions with consciousness. And that's probably why it's too complicated for the human mind, unless you're evolved, to really understand where everything is coming. So you kind of work with the present to try to build positive karma, however that is. So that's easier to do. It's easier for me to say, okay, from here on, I'm going to do things I feel are going to be more positive in my life, and to do, affect me more positively for the future. Because the past is so complicated. And I think there's some truth to that. Even if you think of your own past in this life, and you think of the motives and the experiences, it's hard to understand, why did I go to do that? Why did I react this way?
Yeah.
I've often said that the fans of neutral karma are like me and Christ. So I'm glad there's now 3 of us, because I think we're a small group. But I like that idea of neutral karma. I've always been a big fan of that. And I think Christ in his teaching said, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. And I think it was a karmic statement. He was saying, look, that's his whole deal, and you let him deal with it. Don't take responsibility for his karma. You worry about yours, and you deal with your responsibilities. And once you've dealt with your responsibilities, then you don't owe anybody anything. You're neutral at that point. But you see people that are enabling people. They're trying to do their work as well. They're overextending themselves in a sense. And to me, that's too positive. And I've thought, Kabbalistically, maybe it's because we study a lot of Kabbalah and the 3 pillars, but I've often said that it's the best Kabbalistic story is Goldilocks and the 3 bears, and that everything is too hard and too soft and just right, or too hot and too cold and just right. And I think karma is the same. I think it's too negative, too positive, or just right. And I've often said neutral karma is just right karma. That's what it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I thought you'd be pleased. He says the same thing, and he's a master. He's not alive anymore, a Buddhist master. And I was going to say something about, that also, that idea of bad and good. One of the things I find probably not really helpful is the overemphasis of the word light in the spiritual community. And particularly since now science is has this thing about dark matter and dark energy being part of
hole
creation. It's almost a form of racism, because darkness is bad and light is good. No matter what people say, oh no, I don't mean that. Why do you use the word light then?
Yeah.
And even Jung was into integrating the personality into something. Who knows what will be an integrated personality? Neither light nor shadow. But if you think of even the concept of nighttime and darkness, how we can rest and seeds grow out of the soil. And it's always bothered me. I don't like that language. I don't want to call myself. I don't. I
Because
find
you can't have one without the other.
Yeah,
That's
it's
how
like
you
the
know
yin
it's
and
there.
yang,
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
it's feminine,
Yeah.
masculine
They
energies.
might not understand each other, but you can't have the one without the other.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say something about the free will and use an example like homelessness. And how much free will they have to change their life, how much that's part of the trauma thing I was talking about. And when you give something to a homeless, they're going to have food for 5 minutes. But what's happening after that, you have no control over, you don't control them. You help them in a way, but they don't change. So you just have to be in the moment of making them happy. And I have an example. One time I gave like some food to a homeless person, and he said, I don't like that. So he didn't want it. So it's kind of it was offensive to me. But what I'm saying is, what is their free will of changing their life? Do they want to change it? What is my part of being touched by their life and understand what's going on with them? Do I need to care? And I wonder how much free will they have and why
Well,
they
get
are
into
at that point in their life.
To me, having worked in the community a little bit with some of these issues of homelessness and violence, you get into a much more complicated scenario because there are societal abuses that are very real that are, again, based on a misuse of energy and will. And they are not in an isolated way, most of them creating their reality. That's, again, that cruel idea. It's an interdependent thing. And if I live in a city that is corrupt and has, people that are so abusive that we're afraid, and that's creating this reality. And to me, things like homelessness offer us a chance to look at our humanity and to do something compassionate, no matter how small it is. Even if I say, you know what, Krista, I'm going to go and see how many homeless people are in our city. And I'm going to send $10 a month to something, because not all of us will be as involved. But that's one of those things I don't think, there are some people probably would be homeless. Everyone says that homelessness itself would never completely go away, but many people, when they're helped, they recover. They have, I've read enough studies where they're given proper opportunities. But once we're on the streets, we don't have a chance because we don't have a shower, we don't have a toilet. People have so much prejudice against the homelessness. You're dealing with, again, it's a complicated thing. So for me, it's a chance to become a better person when I see things that are cruel. And that's me, how I view the world. I say, and I'll do what I can, whatever that small bit is.
Yeah. I went to the soup kitchen, feeding the homeless, like you said, and I was really disappointed and saddened by the experience, because there is absolutely no compassion there. And you had the salad in a trash bag, and and it was feeding them, and there were no compassion, no emotion. It felt like it was an industry or a business, and I was really touched by it. And I what can I do? I can't do anything about it. It's not in my power to do this. And being a homeless, what is it? Is it fate? Is it destiny? Is it their destiny to be a homeless, or can they change it? Do they want to change it? That's why I was talking about and asking you about the free will.
Well, some people do. We met people. Michael once did reading for a young man when he first came out to the beach, on the beach, and he was homeless at the time. He was fleeing violence from his neighborhood. And Michael was just kind of nice to him, and people were pretty nice to him. And he finally got some work, and he finally got a little job, and he got off the streets. He wanted to. He was homeless because he was fleeing violence, and he was young.
Yeah.
Oops. Well, here we go. We're still talking about
Time
free will.
is flying.
So anyway, we hope we gave you a lot of food for thought. So please subscribe to us if you have
Yes.
not. Like us, ring the bell. Comments, we love your comments. Thank you so much. And I wanted to leave with this phrase from Leonard Cohen, like a bird on the wire, like a drunk in the midnight choir, I have tried in my way to be free.
Beautiful.
So you try too.
Yes.
Good night.
Thank you very much.